Let's start off with the overall sentiment that we've been seeing. Yes, we saw some pressure coming through yesterday, but overall investors seem to be relatively confident that things will go higher from these levels onwards. Do you agree with us, or do you think we could see some profit taking from here onwards?
I think on overall it appears very likely that we could see a little bit of profit taking. I think what we saw yesterday was probably a culmination of concerns investors have started having with regards to the new constitution. I think most investors have priced in that the constitution will pass in the upcoming referendum. And given the current uncertainties that we've had in the last few days, I think we've started seeing investors a little jittery. But in any case, I think the overall economic scenario is quite positive. The macro, the micro, the politics is also looking quite okay. The only concern is the constitution.
Well, just looking at the economy in general, because things are also looking so fantastic from an economic perspective. I mean, the shilling has taken a slight knock over the last few sessions, but we have seen it bouncing back. In terms of the earnings as well, we have seen a mixed bag, and it seems that most earnings have come through better than expected. What do you make of the numbers that have been coming through, and also how do you relate them to what's been happening on the ground from an economic perspective?
Okay, well, maybe starting off with the currency. I mean, one should not forget, even though we've weakened against the US dollar, Europe is a major trading partner for Kenya, and the currency has strengthened quite substantially against the pound, against the euro, and so the weakening against the dollar, and that's been very marginal, less than 5%, and that's followed a very sustained period of a very, very stable currency. On overall, that doesn't pose any concern. In fact, my main worry is that maybe we're probably losing some competitiveness by trying to be closer to the dollar. But I think the currency is very good from that standpoint. If you look at the overall economy, we've seen a lot of pickup. Last year's growth was at 2.6%, way higher than our estimates. We're looking at around 2%. But we are seeing sectors recovering, most of the sectors, tourism, agriculture, a lot of investment going into the infrastructure. So all this coming together, and looking at 2010 in particular, it appears very likely that we'll post very good growth, and that would be good for the economy.
Of course. And Rio Tinto also came out with some earnings, and we know this company came under significant pressure. One of the big reasons, of course, is the drought. Tea price is looking far better, though. But Rio Tinto, in fact, has been underperforming the other tea companies in Kenya.
Yeah, that's true. Rio does sisal. So sisal prices haven't performed as well as tea prices. Rio is the biggest sisal producer in Africa. And given the marketing arrangement that it has with Wigglesworth, basically it hasn't benefited as much as the other commodities, and sisal in particular has a substitute. You can actually use synthetic fiber instead of sisal, which is grown in farms. So from that standpoint, when production falls, they don't benefit from the upside that comes with prices. In the case that we've seen, like for coffee and tea, even though we had production falling for those commodities, they benefited quite substantially. Obviously, investors will be looking to see whether they could post a recovery and sort of like sustain, given the current trends, and also just to try and improve on the pricing mechanism, I think, and probably try and add value into that. But if you look at the other companies which have posted earnings, I mean, we've had Safaricom which posted very good numbers, and obviously that's just telling you about the strength of the economy despite all those challenges. I mean, obviously, looking into Safaricom deeper, we've had the regulations, the current regulations, which are, there are some regulations that are supposed to be introduced in the telecommunications sector, which were broadly viewed as supposed to rein in on Safaricom, and those ones have been suspended pending further discussions. I think that should provide impetus. But obviously, I think that the idea is to try and have also the other competitors being able to catch up with Safaricom. Yeah. But obviously, you cannot penalize innovation. If you look at Safaricom, it's made lots of innovations in this market. It's now testing 4G. If you look at the other players, they're still struggling with 3G. And obviously we need, obviously you should reward companies which are innovative enough and bringing technologies to the people.
Well,
if you look at the M-Pesa product.
Yeah, looking at the likes of Safaricom, you mentioned the M-Pesa product, and of course M-Cash working so very well for the likes of Equity Bank and of course Safaricom as well. Safaricom results came in better than expected. We haven't really been seeing a big move in its share price though. Equity Bank though also coming under slight pressure, and that's after hitting a 12-month high on its share price. But from an investment perspective, some companies have rallied quite significantly and others are lagging. Which would you be buying at this stage of the game?
I mean, it's very difficult to say it. I mean, if you look at Safaricom, we've had some of the turbulence Safaricom has had in India, and most investors have been trying to compare that and looking at Bati coming into the Kenyan market and thinking that may pose us some competition. So that's caused a damper on that stock. Equity Bank has also rallied quite substantially, and even though it's a good story, it's still quite expensive, and we probably need to see how this current arrangement with the new account works in terms of trickling into earnings to see whether to actually buy it. I mean, I'll probably still look at companies like Kenyan. I think despite the rally, I think they still have good scope in terms of growth. The Pan-African footprint for that oil companies has expanded quite rapidly across the continent. And I think the strategy still looks quite positive, given the current arrangement. I think Kenyan would still look quite attractive. And obviously some of the tea companies, Sasini is still looking quite attractive. In the utilities, I'll probably look at Kenya Power rather than Kenyan, but still Kenya Power has some share restructuring to go, so we'll wait for the details of that to really know how to recommend going forward.
And Eric, just give me your views on the East African integration plans and what it could possibly do to earnings. And I know that a lot of Kenyan companies are looking at private equity, and apart from that also expanding quite extensively. I mean, Kenyan being one example, but there are so many examples right now in Kenya. How is this going to impact the bottom line?
I think going forward, we'll probably see a lot of M&A activity, both in Kenya and in the region. Not to forget in the regional, Uganda and Rwanda in particular, we are seeing very big listings coming through. Tulo is going to list in Uganda. In Rwanda, we'll have Brarilwa. And obviously, and Tanzania has lots of local companies listed. And with the integration coming through and having like one platform, all these countries bring a lot of value into the exchange. Obviously, liquidity is a concern, but looking at the broader picture, I think there's a lot going on for the East African countries. Uganda is going on with its expansion. It has oil. We have Rwanda with its 2020 vision, which apparently completes 10 years ahead of its of Kenya's 2030 vision to become a middle-income country. So you can see a lot of progress being made in the region. Tanzania, of course, has gas, and it's also done very well. Obviously, they need to just tweak the economy a little bit, but I think there's a lot of promise in that economy as well. Burundi is also part of the community, and it's setting up the structures, and obviously that would be a very big plus. I think from a logistical point of view, you just need to set up probably the transport system, and maybe the rail, the road, and that will go a long way into boosting trade in the region.